Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you all for coming today. We have had a very active last 24 hours with Director Ron Davis here, and we're very appreciative for the time that he's spent in our city. As you all know, obviously the number one responsibility of all of us in public service is public safety and making sure that we've got a city where people feel safe, where businesses feel like they can expand, and where there's a bright future for everybody involved. When you think about the context of public safety, there's several lenses to look through it and several ways that we work together to make sure we are a safe city. We created our Office for Safe and Healthy Neighborhoods about 3 years ago. It's involved with the community in many, many different ways, from reentry to youth development to education. Obviously, we have Louisville Metro Police Department as a critical part of our public safety equation. But we won't arrest our way out of any problems, and they are one part of an overall system. And then probably the most important part is our community. How is our community involved with making sure that we have a safe community, that they are fully engaged as citizens, that they are determined and willing and freely able to control our public spaces as well. So it takes all of us to make sure that we have a safe city. When you take a look at crime in the city over the last several years, overall crime has been flat, and we've been through that at many press conferences before. Our biggest challenge in the past year is the increase in violent crime, specifically homicides. Last year we had an uptick in our homicide count, as did many cities around the country as well. This year we're also off to a tough start with homicides. So one of the things that we're always intent on is understanding that we can always learn more and we can always do better as a community. So we're constantly looking at other cities, see what they're doing, how effective they are, maybe where they're falling short, so that we can say, is there something that we can enhance or add to our portfolio of public safety measures as well. So it was within that context that we have been working with the COPS Office, Community-Oriented Policing Services Office, out of the Department of Justice in the White House for the past several years. And in the past 3 years, having discussions with its director, Ron Davis, who has spent the last 24 hours with us, as I mentioned as well. It has been a busy 24 hours that he's been here in our city. And just to give you an idea of what we've done, we started off with a meeting with many people in the community that are involved in the business of keeping our city safe and healthy. We then met with our youth implementation team and other youths from around the city to get their perspective on what was going on in the streets of Louisville. After that, for dinner last night, we met with our Muslim leaders in our community. As you all are aware, we're very engaged with our Islamic community and vice versa on issues of public safety. This morning, we had a meeting with our Louisville Metro employees where Director Davis told us really about the story of his life and how he became involved with public safety and his key learnings both for public safety and some leadership advice for our Metro employees. Next meeting was with LMPD to talk specifically about the issues that LMPD has going on, our relationship with the COPS office. Then we had another interesting meeting after that with Professor Ricky Jones and some of the folks at the University of Louisville to take a look at public safety, Black Lives Matters, other youth movements, what's going on in the country, what's working, not working, and the challenges and movements related to that. Then Director Davis went out to the Southern Police Institute to talk to a class that they have underway, and then we just closed with a presentation from a public health perspective, focus on youth violence prevention, issues of racism, how they impact public safety as well. So to say that it's been a stimulating 24 hours would be a massive understatement. And Director Davis has been here in effect as part of our city team teaching, maybe learning a little, but certainly inspiring us to do more work, and this has been a tremendously successful visit by the director in my mind. Director Davis has a long career in public safety, first 20 years of his policing career with the Oakland Police Department. He then was picked by the citizens of East Palo Alto to be their chief of police for 8 years. before President Obama asked him to come to Washington, D.C. and lead the COPS office. So Director Davis has dedicated his life to public safety and the people of our country, and for that we're deeply appreciative. So Director Davis, if you'd share a few thoughts with us.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Good afternoon. Let me start by just adding one more part to my background, in addition to spending close to 30 years in law enforcement and now being the director of the COPS office, which for those who are not familiar with the COPS office is the component within the Department of Justice and the administration that focuses on advancing community policing nationwide. We do that through grants, we do that through technical assistance in training. And since the formation of the COPS office, we've invested some close to $14, $15 billion in advancing this idea. But I also was honored to be appointed by the President to serve as the Executive Director of the President's Task Force on 21st Century Policing. And it's in that context that I come here to Louisville at the request of the mayor. And what the mayor says is we've been working together for a couple of years. Louisville is part of the Police Data Initiative out of the White House and is recognized as a leader nationally on many issues regarding public safety and policing. And so the mayor asked me to come to really see what's happening in the city. And so I wanted to come to make this last day and a half visit about not so much me presenting information to the city, although I really appreciate the exchange, but also to see what's working and so we can share with the field. The president was very clear when he created the task force in December of 2014 that he wanted recommendations that were tenable. He wanted the task force to help the field build trust between the police and the communities that we serve, and to make sure that we're still enhancing public safety so that crime is still going down. If you're familiar with the report, there were 59 recommendations outlined in the report. And what we're doing right now is we're trying to identify, and we are working to identify police departments in cities around the country that have taken that report, that have reviewed it, that have examined it, evaluated against their own police operations, and are taking very progressive steps in implementing it so that we can partner with them to identify best practices. So what I've seen over the last day and a half has been astonishing, it has been amazing, and there's a lot of lessons for me to take back to Washington. And when I say Washington, the lessons, not so much that we're going to provide lessons to Washington, D.C., as much as by taking it back with me, we will share this with the over 18,000 local, state, and tribal law enforcement departments. Let me summarize what I've seen in a day and a half. One is I've seen a very diverse community trying to face collectively with the challenges that are faced with every community in this country. Challenges of public safety, challenges of building trust between the police and the community, challenges of national security, and just the basic challenges that we face as a country. But what really stood out for me is that people were very, very candid in their assessment of where the city is at, very candid of the idea that there's a challenges to remain. So in one sense, people are acknowledging that there's, at the city level, at the community level, very strong leadership that is working together to solve problems together. But they're also acknowledging that there's still a lot of work to be done, so which would describe pretty much every community in the country. And so we've seen a community that's coming together. To have dinner with the Muslim community was very powerful in hearing concerns of these residents of their concerns about hate crimes, their concerns about radicalization, and their commitment to be strong members of this community. And we'll take that back with us. To be able to talk to an Office of Public Health within the city that is looking at violent crime through a public health lens. And for us, that is a key. We will not arrest our way out of crime and violence. We should not even try to. And previous efforts to do that have resulted in a widespread arrest of people and a disparate incarceration of young men of color that we know as a country that we cannot sustain, that we have to reverse, and we have to make those reinvestments back into our community. So to see a city focus on things like looking at violence through a public health lens, looking at reentry programs to try to start helping people reintegrate back into their community through reimage, looking at how to engage young people. There's been at least 3 venues over the last day and a half in which I've been able to engage with young people that really have a voice, and not just a superficial meeting where we just talk about the problems, but have a voice to power, that they have the ability to tell their perspectives to policymakers. And what was telling to me is not that the meeting was convened, but that when the chief walked in, that the mayor came in, that they already knew the chief and the mayor, which means there's a relationships being established that in the long run will improve the relationship between the police department and the police and the community. I'm looking at an opportunity to talk to officers and see them committed to wanting to make a difference in their community. And when I had an opportunity to talk about things that could benefit them, instead asked about how do we prevent kids from getting in trouble? How do we basically engage with our youth for mentoring programs that will continually focus on doing things that were good for the community? So I want to thank the mayor for his leadership. One, for inviting me here to see what the department is doing with regards, and the city, quite frankly, and the community is doing on coming together to address these challenges. Two, to be able to go back and take some lessons learned of what the department is specifically doing with regards to implementing the 21st century policing. And I will say this, they shared with me a chart that shows every pillar, every recommendation, the evaluation is being done, what can be done, where there's challenges, what are the obstacles, how they work through it. And this is very impressive. And in fact, it is my hope within the next day or two that they will be featured on our implementation map on a CUP's website so that the other 18,000 agencies can learn and be connected with the department. I think it was a very good visit. Like I said, for me, it is to be able to go back and share this. And I just want to applaud the men and women for their leadership. So going back to the mayor, I want to thank him for his leadership, for asking me to come out. I want to definitely applaud the men and women of the police department. That I saw a high level of commitment, and it was great to be able to talk to them, to share with them, and I would just tell the citizens of Louisville that you have a good department. Everybody acknowledges, and there's a lot of work to be done. And I think you should be very optimistic that together you can accomplish a lot of great things. I will close with this. As you know, the president put a strong emphasis on building trust in the community. The Attorney General is taking a 6-city tour right now, where each city is focusing on the pillars from one of the specific pillars. And so this idea of implementing the task force report, this focus on building trust with our communities, is not just a priority locally, it is a priority of the president, it's a priority of the Attorney General. So the value of this visit was not just to show and just say, let me see what you're doing, but to truly identify what's working and to identify what's not working. What are the setbacks? What are the challenges? What are the unanswered questions? And to be able to share all of that with the rest of the 18,000 police departments so that collectively we can advance policing in this country and really achieve the goal that the president outlined, which is effective policing in the 21st century. So thank you once again for this opportunity to talk to you. I'm standing ready to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, so we're happy to take any questions.
Did you see anything that particularly stood out in terms of what might be missing when it comes to police and community relations?
A couple things. So one is, and I alluded to it earlier, and I think it's significant, the recognition of treating violence or viewing violence through the public health lens. Why that's important, when you look at violence as a public health lens, you start realizing that violence spreads in many cases like a bloodborne pathogen within very tight social networks and based on at-risk behaviors, which means your intervention is more public health models, interventions that do not have the collateral damage of the mass incarceration of an entire people or people of color, but interventions that can not only disrupt the violence, but provide genuine, sincere opportunities for young people to thrive in our country. So trying to get that focus is very significant, especially if we're going to reverse the tide on this mass incarceration that we've seen for a couple generations. The other thing is that I think is standing out is the recognition, for example, as the police department is looking at implementing the task force recommendation, the importance of some basic concepts that are guiding principles that we think are important. One, the first day I got here, the chief said something that stood out, and we want to see more and more chiefs talk about this, and that's the recognition that policing in the 21st century is more about being guardians than warriors. And what we mean by that, the guardian mindset, is that police officers are here to guard the community, protect the Constitution, and serve. Now, clearly, any police officer would tell you this is one of the most challenging jobs there is in the country. It is dangerous and at risk, and we also need warriors to be able to defend the community and to defend themselves. But the mindset that they're here to guard is what we're seeing here. The focus on training on issues like procedural justice so that they can better interact with the community. The focus on providing training for implicit bias. These are all recommendations that are in the task force report, and probably some of the materials, some of the stuff that the department even started before the task force report came out. So those are some key things. I mean, there's a lot of other details, but I would say looking at violence through a public health lens, starting to look at the mindset and the culture of a police department, not because something is wrong, but because we need to advance. And if I can say this, and this goes across the country, the president said this, the attorney general says this, and I will say it, that we are not hesitant to say that we believe the vast majority, the overwhelming majority of men and women that serve in law enforcement are doing a tremendous job. We know we have those isolated incidences in which people bring dishonor to the badge, but more importantly, it's not just about the individual officers. We know we have policing systems that need to change. And some of these systems are so bad in some cases that even good officers have bad outcomes. So as we look at reforming policing, we should focus on reforming the systems, the training, the practices, recognizing that you still have good men and women that are trying to serve, and that part of changing the system is to support them as well.
Was there anything that you wish you would have seen here, or you thought you might see here that you didn't see here?
No, and part of that is I'm not going to paint a picture of a perfect city. So I think that would be disingenuous and misleading. And because I didn't expect that, I think I was not let down. And if I can say this, I think when I'm talking to the mayor, when he described the relationship, he described it in such a manner that it was very realistic, which was that the relationship stable and growing, which in today's time I think is very powerful. It's recognizing that the effort is being made. But for those who live in a community who may be watching this, it is not suggesting that every community has a powerful relationship with the department or the city. It's not suggesting that everything is perfect. It's suggesting that it's growing and that people are working on it. And that's the key thing. For us in community policing, since we advanced that nationwide, there's a motto that we think is very important, and that is the community police need to be co-producers of public safety. Both are responsible for public safety in the community. So this wasn't just about the role of the city or the police department. This was also about the role of the community. So it was great to hear from a lot of community members. So no, I don't think anything was missing, but I just want to reinforce primarily because I think where progress needs to be made, it wasn't missing. It was already acknowledged, and people are working on it. So I didn't have false expectations coming in.
This morning, a councilwoman laid out an anti-violence plan, and one of the aspects of it was to increase community policing. And I was wondering if you could, talk about maybe the challenges for a community like Louisville's size and its makeup to further community policing initiatives.
Well, interesting. So there's a challenge. Community policing, the chief will tell you, community policing requires resources because a police department has to. One, community policing is not a program. It is really an operational philosophy. It's the way, it's a culture. It's the way the police department as a whole does a business. But if you're going to start doing more and more community engagement, getting out of the car, getting to know the residents, engaging in programs that are non-enforcement, getting to know the youth through activities that will not only occupy the public space and create public safety, but increase their public health. That takes time because people still have to respond to the 911 calls. So I'm proud to say, I think it was 2015, that this department is also a recipient of one of our COPS hiring grants for $1.5 million. And they've been advised, as the rest of the nation has been, that we are also launching open solicitations for our 2016 hiring grants on Monday. So that's one of the things why we're here, is because as we start funding the COPS hiring program, then we just don't want to say, here's $1.5 million to just add cops to the streets. But it has to be that you're going to use that to further advance a community policing strategy so that we're funding this advancement of community policing nationwide. And I will ask the mayor and the chief to get into what they're going to do with those 10 officers because it's significant. And that's the other reason why we're here, is that we also want to check our investments, that we're investing in the community. And since the office has been a creation, I think we've invested greatly, which we're very proud of, and we want to see what the return on that investment. We want to see the lessons learned. And so I'm glad to hear that there is this push to advance community policing, because that will coincide with the idea of the grants that we are providing. Mr. Mayor.
Director Davis, I think laid it out very, very well. You know, for us, and to Councilwoman Green's point, the crime we've seen in our community is not going to be something that we're going to be able to police our way out of or arrest our way out of, and you've heard me say that before. What we need to do to be effective in this community is to develop trust, and to develop trust with people in the community where they will get to the point that we can work together to identify and resolve crime in our community. And the challenge for us, and really I think where she is trying to go with this whole concept of becoming more community oriented, because we absolutely buy into the underlying philosophy that Community policing is as simple as the police and the community working together to mutually identify and resolve problems in this community and to do what we can to improve the quality of life here. We're there. We buy into that. But the director is right. It is trying to find the time to do that. We have already implemented foot patrols. We have officers on their shifts as time allows, getting out of their cars, spending more time interacting with people in our community. We spent time in our in-service class all last year for all of our officers focusing on the concepts of procedural justice and legitimacy and implicit bias to make sure that our officers had that understanding. This year, as part of our in-service training, we're doing a reintroduction to the concepts of community-oriented policing, and they're doing a community policing exercise where they're out in the community addressing real problems as part of that class. But to really get to where we want to be, and that's why our relationship with the COPS office is so important. The grant that Director Davis talked about, these 10 officers, their role will be to supplement what we already have the division resource officers doing, being involved in more of the long-term problem solving. They will be free from this role of taking 911 calls. They'll be actually working with citizens as we're trying to resolve problems. We have some that would be dedicated to improving our relationships with the refugee and immigrant community and making sure that we're making progress there. But we want to make sure that we have people dedicated where their full-time job is to try to work with our community and do what we can together to try to not only improve trust, but to improve the level of safety in our community. And the director mentioned future grant opportunities. Believe me, we're looking at them and we plan to apply.
All right, well, in closing, thanks for everybody for coming out. Again, we really appreciate our partnership with Director Davis and the COPS department, and look forward to continuing to push forward on this area where we know we need improvement. We'll always need improvement, and that will always be our mantra. And I also want to thank LMPD for the good job that they do day in and day out, all the folks that are involved with our Office for Safe and Healthy Neighborhoods, and all of our citizens here in Louisville who are working with this toward a safer city. Thank you all. Have a good weekend.
This has been a Metro TV production, a public service of Louisville Metro government.